Well, thank you everybody for joining WeConnect International and GSK today for this Procurement Insight session presented by Raj Patani, who is a Senior Manager within the Global Supplier Diversity team at GSK. My name is Maggie Berry. I'm the Executive Director for WeConnect International here in Europe, and I'm delighted that you're participating today and or listening back to the recording. While the travel restrictions imposed by COVID-19 are preventing us from bringing our community together in person, it doesn't mean that we can't use technology to bring everybody together and to maintain our ability to create connections and provide useful insight for our women-owned businesses. Raj and the GSK team are going to be sharing an overview of a high-level overview of procurement and how that all works within GSK, their expectations of potential suppliers, and really what you should be ready for if you're going to be trying to win some business with them, as well as an insight into what they do and don't buy, and I'm sure lots of other good stuff as well. We will have time for questions at the end. So please make the most of that opportunity to ask Raj and the GSK team questions about doing business with them. To keep background noise to minimum, can I just ask everybody who isn't speaking just to stick on mute for just now, and then we can come off mute and or use the chat box to ask any questions as we're going along. I hope this is going to be a useful session, and we'd always love to hear your feedback, so please do get in touch with us. So Raj, it's over to you. The floor is yours, and let's hear a bit more about GSK. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Maggie. Can you hear me? Just checking.
Yep, you're all good. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Maggie, for providing the platform for us to be able to deliver this session today. And welcome to those of you on the call that are listening in. As Maggie said, my name is Raj Patani. I'm part of the Global Supplier Diversity team at GSK. Been here for about a year now and based in the UK. I've also got a couple of my colleagues on the call with me today that's going to help me go through the session. So before we go any further, guys, do you want to just maybe give a quick intro, starting with Will?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Holmes. I'm the Director for Global Supplier Diversity at GSK.
And hi, everyone. I'm Marcelo Novais. I'm Senior Manager at the Global Supplier Diversity here at GSK, based out of the US.
Hi, I'm Georgie. I'm an industrial placement student in the Supplier Diversity team, and I'm based in the UK.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. So over the next 20 minutes or so, what we're going to do is, as Maggie said, we're going to take you through a quick introduction of GSK and our procurement structure, and then spending a bit more time on our supplier diversity overview and vision, and then ending with some tips and best practices for you guys when engaging with our category teams and when navigating through our RFX processes. So starting with GSK, we are a science-led global healthcare company. What a lot of people don't know is that we're split into three very distinct companies. We have our pharmaceuticals business, which has a broad range of innovative and established medicines in respiratory, HIV, infectious diseases, oncology, and immunoinflammation. We then have our world-leading consumer healthcare business, and that has some of the most innovative products and household brands in oral health, pain relief, respiratory, nutrition, and skin health, some of which I'm sure you guys are aware of, the likes of Sensodyne and Panadol. And finally, we have our vaccines business, which is the largest vaccines company globally, and it helps deliver vaccines to help protect people against infectious diseases such as malaria and HIV, and of course, the current kind of pandemic that we're in. So in clinical trials at the moment to try and find a solution to that as well. Moving on to our procurement structure. Marcelo, do you want to help take us through these slides?
Absolutely. Thank you, Raj. So just to give you a little bit of an understanding of how our global procurement organization works. Well, first of all, what we do from a procurement organization is really ensure that we are sourcing goods and services for GSK, having the best value in mind. So not necessarily being concerned on price alone, but really the value, making sure that we are sourcing what really makes sense from a value perspective to the company. And if you have a look at our global procurement organization, what we call our one global procurement, you're going to see that we have the indirect categories, which are actually they are managed centrally, and that includes the R&D group, the marketing and sales, the facilities, capital and logistics, and corporate services. So that includes all of our indirect categories. We also have direct categories, which is represented here by the directs and sites. And when we look at the indirect categories, that indirect categories, they are centrally managed, but they are supported by the local operating companies, the LOCs that you see here on the left-hand side. They are the ones that actually make sure that the global strategies can be implemented at the local operating countries or the local companies. And we have the Center of Excellence really providing operational procurement support across all of our one global procurement organization. So really, from a procurement organization, our vision is to become the most effective and influential procurement group within the industry, so that we can and we will achieve this through excellence in implementation, highly efficient processes, strategic leadership, and driving innovation through our suppliers. And really, this piece around innovation with our suppliers is where we play, in Supplier Diversity, we play a key role. We are really always out there scouting the marketplace for those suppliers that really have those innovations and those niche services and products that can help us, that can help GSK with our innovative agenda. Raj? Thank you. And just to give you an idea of our size, we have, as a global procurement organization, over 700 procurement professionals that are distributed in about 59 countries. And again, just to give you an idea from a size of our procurement organization, we manage over 38,000 suppliers, and we also manage a span of about 12.8 billion pounds. And within our procurement organization, we manage over 46,000 procurement contracts. We have over 15,000 purchase orders being raised on a 12-month period. We also have negotiated through auctions over 864 million pounds, and we have sourced through ESourcing, which is our online platform, over 2.1 billion pounds in spend. So by looking at this, you can have an idea of how big our procurement organization is, not only from a number of employees, but also from the number of suppliers and the spend that we manage. And now I want to pass it over to Will Holmes, which will provide a little bit more information about our Global Supply Diversity Initiative. Will?
Thanks, Marcelo. And so I think, as you all heard in the beginning of our presentation today, we wanted to share with you our supplier diversity video. I'll just kind of give a little bit of brief on the video itself, but the video just shares kind of what we call the what and why of supplier diversity. We use this both internally to drive education and awareness among our procurement organization, as well as with our stakeholders in the business. But we also like it to have it available to be able to share with you, our external community as well, just so that you learn a little bit more about how we're treating supplier diversity internally as a company. One thing I will share with you, there is a success story also embedded in the video where we highlight a true story of a supplier that we have been working with for several years now, that is UK-based, a UK-based diverse supplier. And through that success story, we're using that to just kind of amplify the value that diverse suppliers can bring to GSK. And in that success story, literally over time, over about a 5-year period, the diverse supplier pretty much was able to double and triple their business with GSK. So it's just a perfect example of how supplier diversity works. And the end of the video kind of leads into our GSK heartbeat. And we share that supplier diversity is part of the heartbeat of responsible sourcing and procurement, and that our team is here to help create the next journey for the next supplier and the next stakeholder and procurement person within GSK to have success through supplier diversity. All right, we can go to the next slide. And we have top-down support at GSK. So this quote here is from Emma Walmsley, our CEO, and she was at a JP Morgan healthcare conference earlier in 2020. And she was on a panel discussing diversity as a whole, and the topic of supplier diversity came up. And she shared, and the one thing I want to highlight here, she shared the importance around inclusion and diversity is much more than just the faces that you see in the annual report. What that means really is that it's bigger than just workforce diversity. It's bigger than just showing diversity, just in terms of what you put out there in publications and media and communications. It's all about how we do business, and supplier diversity is a big part of that. It's how we do business with our supply chain. It's how we drive and try to achieve the best solutions by doing our due diligence to find the right suppliers for the right fit, for the right opportunities. So the fact that we have that awareness at our CEO level and below, and the sponsorship and support is really huge for us as a company. And as we go into the next slide, I'll talk a little bit to how we've been developing our strategy over these last couple of years. So starting from 2018 and really in previous years, the GSK Supplier Diversity Program, just kind of led itself into becoming very focused on U.S. small business compliance. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, in the U.S., there's a big push around complying to U.S. government programs around small business. Now, when you look at just the U.S. small business government programs, you see, yes, it is driving opportunities for diverse suppliers that are small businesses, but it's also limiting as well too, because within the government definitions of small business, you don't see specific call outs for disability-owned businesses or LGBT-owned businesses. You don't even really see specific call outs to minority-owned businesses. There is a call out to small disadvantaged businesses, which a lot of minority-owned businesses fall into that category, but there's no specific call out and definitely nothing that goes into ethnicity details. So as a program growth opportunity, we saw the opportunity to go into a more of a strategic shift as a company and really gain true value, unlocking that value, creating that value through supplier diversity for GSK. So going into 2019, we wanted to take that strategic shift. We wanted to include all diverse suppliers, no matter the size classification, and then putting a plan in place and a strategy that would take us into 2020 where we could truly launch into a truly global program. And we will be launching our UK program, so very much to come soon. You'll be hearing more about that, and we'll be putting some announcements in place so that as we go into 2021, we'll be establishing those targets. But we did establish U.S. diversity targets in 2020 already, and we're doing very well despite the impact of COVID, despite the economic impact, the hardships faced, despite the lack of opportunity to be able to connect category managers with suppliers in many cases. We were still able to achieve our initial targets. And now as we go into 2021, we really want to build upon that. And you see the wider gap there between 2020 and 2021 is because we know that we had a lot of work to do. So this is our opportunity now to take a bigger leap and really drive that economic impact into the supplier community, into our consumer and patient community, to disadvantaged groups. As well as drive strategic value for GSK. So we're looking to make that big leap. We're looking to learn more about suppliers within WeConnect, both in the US and the UK, but in other countries as well, because we will be exploring our international markets. We have plans to already to expand into South Africa and India and Brazil. So we will be opening a lot of doors, and we hope that will lead to a lot of opportunities to work more with suppliers such as yourselves. And now we'll touch on. Oh, go ahead, Raj.
No, I'm just going to say, handing over to Georgie to maybe start touching on some of the tips and best practices for suppliers.
Yeah, sure. So, some tips and best practices on how to do business with GSK. So some of this might appear quite straightforward and obvious, and you've probably heard it, the same or similar messages from other corporates. However, we really do believe that these are the foundations to becoming more competitive and doing business with us. So first off, putting your best foot forward, simply stating that you have all the capabilities and you're able to fulfill them all may not be the best strategy, as it quite quickly becomes clear, you don't have examples to back up these claims. So focusing on your core capabilities and having these backed up with rigid examples and leading with this really is the best strategy. Furthermore, make sure that your literature supports your capabilities. So if your business is referred to the supplier diversity team, generally it's only your website that we have to go off. And if your website doesn't show and demonstrate the services you can offer, then it's quite difficult for us to consider you for these opportunities, even if you are in fact capable. So make sure that your website reflects the best version of your business and the services you're offering. So the second tip is to do your research. And once again, this is an obvious point, but it's essential that you understand your client and know their needs and find their pain points. This way you can assess how you can add value as a supplier and how you can satisfy their needs, which puts you in a stronger position. So your research should cover the company, the industry, the locations and the products, the services they procure. And finally, and maybe most importantly, be persistent yet patient. Finding the right balance of this can be difficult. However, we suggest to continue attending events just like this one through advocacy organisations in order to seek out new opportunities. From a GSK perspective, and I'm sure it's probably the same with other corporates, we try and bring new and different stakeholders to each event. So even if your proposition doesn't resonate with one stakeholder, it might have another stakeholder we bring to another event. So keep attending these events. Also, once you're in conversations with category managers and other individuals at GSK, we also suggest that you agree a method and frequency of communication with them in order not to come across as pestering them, especially when there's no current opportunities they can offer you. This way you can stay in contact with the category manager and check in with them when necessary without feeling like you're pestering them. And as a result, you're likely to stay at the forefront of their mind and they're likely to consider you when a suitable opportunity arises. Raj, do you have anything to add to this?
No, perfect. Thanks so much, Georgie. So yeah, just to reiterate a couple of the points, it is, this slide was really something that we put together that I know a lot of you might have heard before, but we do feel it's quite important. And going back to the slide where Marcelo presented the size of our procurement organization, I think that third bullet point is really relevant there, because you may be wanting us to connect you with certain stakeholders internally, but having shown we have 700 procurement colleagues in 59 countries, it's not always easy for us to do so, right? So it takes us time to be able to find that right person to connect you with. And equally, when attending events through the advocacy organizations, we're not going to be bringing the same people at every event. So sometimes you might be coming to some of these events and seeing that you've already spoken to the likes of GSK and there's no opportunity there, but that might not have resonated with the person that we brought to that specific event, whereas the future events might have someone that's more relative to your business and the products and services that you offer. So I think these were more generic tips, but moving on now, we want to kind of go in and...
Can I just get into
it
very quickly into the put your best foot forward? I think
absolutely.
Sometimes I think in the past, corporations had the idea that, hey, let me just, say that I can do anything so I can get my foot on the door so I can actually start being a supplier to that specific company. And I think that's not really the way that we do things anymore. You really want to make sure that you have very clear the type of service you're actually providing and where you can actually deliver value. Because what you really don't want to do is say that you can do anything. And then let's say, you put the prices down and you put your best foot, say that you can do everything and you get the business. And then really that's not your core competency, right? That's not really what you can do best. So you're really going to be doing not only a disservice to your brand, but also a disservice to GSK. So really be very clear about what it is that you bring value, what your value is, and what you can bring to the company, because that way, once you have developed that successful relationship, that is just going to be an inviting card for you to get more businesses with other corporations. So just really be very clear at what the value that you're providing is. And again, that links totally with doing your research, right? Really know what the pain points that companies that you're looking to doing business with, what the pain points they have identified. And if you can actually go ahead and address those, really that's going to be a great selling point for you to get into those organizations, deliver value, and then expand to other organizations.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Marcelo. So moving on, we wanted to be a bit more specific in terms of some of the feedback that we've got from category managers when we've been speaking with them in terms of how they score specific RFP responses. So just take you through a couple of these points. Marcelo, Georgie, do you guys want to start?
Yep, absolutely. I can take the first one. So we definitely look for evidence. So just saying that you can do things is not really going to cut it. We really want you to make sure that you can explain what you have done in the past and what the outcome was, because that delivers the credibility that we are looking for. So whenever you are responding to the questions, use the STAR approach, right? The situation, the target, the actions, and the results, how you approached that project and what the outcome was, because really that's going to give us the ability to really understand what steps you went through to actually get the success delivered. That's going to be extremely critical. Georgie, would you like to take the second one?
Yeah, sure. So the second point is don't make assumptions, and that's largely due to the fact that there's a lot of people involved in these processes and not all the information is likely to be filtered through. So if there's information that you think is relevant, make sure to attach it to emails, even if you have already previously attached it, because likelihood is the people who further down the line may not have already seen it. So just keep attaching everything that's relevant. It's more helpful for everyone else.
Absolutely. And the reason why George is saying that is because whenever we're doing an RFX, guys, we are going to be scoring you based on what is there. We're not going to be scoring it based on what we know. So regardless of whether who knows or everything that you can do, you have to write it down, because our scoring needs to be based on what the answers you're providing to the RFX. So put down as much as you can answering the questions. And sometimes I've had instances where people say, well, I don't do exactly that, but I do something very similar. That put whatever it is that you think is associated with that, because you might not hit 100%, but you might be able to hit 60%, and that does make a difference. Okay.
Perfect. And what I would say is don't be afraid to repeat yourself, just as Georgie was touching on, right? There's multiple people involved in these processes. So sometimes what happens is you might have sent a presentation deck through, you might have sent a video through, and you think that because you've sent it across already, you don't need to send that again. But what I would say is don't be afraid to kind of, in the different sections of the RFP, repeat that same case study, repeat that same success story that you perhaps have shared with a different stakeholder at somewhere through that process. And that leads quite nicely onto kind of the final kind of point here in terms of don't leave any gaps, because in the past there's a number of kind of suppliers that I've been speaking to, and that perhaps have said, well, we're not sure what to put in here, so we've left this empty. And if you leave a answer or a question empty, we obviously simply just cannot score it. So you're going to end up getting a 0 for that section. I know some of the smaller businesses sometimes are a little bit afraid of putting their financial information across. But again, if that's not put across, we can't assess the financial health of that company, and therefore we'll see that as a potential risk to GSK. So even if you put something, it's better than nothing. Is my advice, but I don't know if Marcelo, you want to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, Raj, I'd like to add one more thing, going back to the not leaving things blank. I think there's two things you can do there too, right? So the first one, if you're not really clear about what to answer, ask further questions, probe us. Whenever we have RFXs, you also have the opportunity, if something is not clear and you don't really know what to answer, probe further, make sure that you really understand the questions, and if you have an applicable answer, please provide it in there. Again, we're only going to be scoring you based on your answer. If you leave it blank, or if you don't ask further questions, we cannot go ahead and actually score your answers. And one important point too, and I've had that from especially suppliers that might not really have a global footprint, is saying, hey, I understand that this RFX is global, but I'm really suited to provide the best service in this specific region, and not necessarily globally. So a lot of times they go like, well, can I ask that question? Can I say, hey guys, I know you understand that the RFX is global, but I really want to focus my answer to this geography, because that's where I really know that I can provide the best value for GSK. Is that something that I can ask in the RFX? Absolutely. The answer, if that's going to be possible or not, is really going to depend on the category manager and the global category manager that's actually managing the RFX. But it's definitely, if you think that you can provide a much better solution, much better value with some different constraints associated with the RFX, do ask the question. The worst that can come out is they say, yeah, I'm sorry, we're really looking for global solutions. But most most of the times, I think the category managers will be willing to consider your response, even though it might not be the global response that they were looking for. So again, do use the RFX. Usually it's in our ESourcing platform. You do use that platform to ask questions. The worst that can happen is that they might say, yep, not relevant at this time, but who knows, they might be considering you guys the next time there is an opportunity with one specific geography being taken into account.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Marcelo. Will, Georgie, any final kind of comments on this slide before we wrap up?
Not from me.
Nope, I think we covered everything. And I'm trying to look. I think we have a couple questions coming through. Is that right, Maggie?
Absolutely. There's a few questions already in the chat. Raj, are you on your final?
We are, yeah, absolutely. So I think
Perfect.
that kind of ends the presentation. We had a slide, but we've already done the intros
Oh,
in terms
great.
of the team. So
Okay,
happy
nice.
to kind of take any questions.
All right, you can leave that one up. That's brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. Great insight and great advice. I've scribbled lots of notes, and I loved your advice about don't worry about repeating yourself. And obviously just making that connection, that stuff that you might send to one person email isn't necessarily going to make it right down to the final. I've got a couple of questions, and then absolutely we've got questions in the chat. But Marcelo, I'd love to go to one of your early comments, which was about, it's not all about price, but it's about best value. Just wondered if you could give any insight into how that's determined, what you're including in that, or how you assess it. I just, you know, we hear different things. I just wondered from a GSK perspective, if there's anything else you could share around how you determine that best value from a supplier.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that one key things that we're always looking at is really the innovation. So what can you do differently that really can deliver value to us? And that value might be in lots of different ways. It might come as shorter lead time, or it might be in faster delivery, a solution that actually you can work with a partner to deliver something faster, cheaper, and better. So really, we are open. We expect the supplier to be the SME in their spaces. So even though we provide a template whenever we ask for an RFX, right? We say, oh, it's a global RFX. We want you to answer. Do probe. If you know that you can deliver the service that's been requested faster, better, cheaper, with innovation in the process that's going to reduce cost or reduce time or reduce waste in any way, do probe us, do ask, can I consider different ways of doing things? Because that's really what we're looking for. We know that the suppliers, they are nimble, they know what to do, they are the best position to provide the answer to us. And a lot of times, the formatting that we are using to ask the questions might not really be the best, but that's the one that we have. So do ask, can I propose different ways of answering? Can I do things differently? Absolutely. Most likely, we're going to say, yes, please do, because we understand the supplier is best positioned to actually provide that innovation, that new solutions that maybe we haven't thought about yet.
Fantastic. And thank you for that. And Will, I've got a question. When you were talking through the video, you were saying that you have the example of the UK-based supplier that over, I think you said maybe 5 years, the relationship's grown and their business has really grown. I just, obviously, one of the things we always say when we're talking about supplier diversity generally is these are long-term programs. And I'm assuming, same as any business, that you will have, you know, relationships that grow and develop with suppliers as you grow and develop with them. And I just wondered two things, one around both kind of connecting to timing, one around how long do RFP processes normally take within GSK? Like if we have an opportunity, like, so say we get something next week, you know, how long might that take? But then the second point around bringing somebody on board and then growing with them over a number of years. I don't know if it's kind of two things, both connected to time.
Yeah, so I think the key word in connection to any timing is patience. You know, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier when Georgie mentioned, you know, be persistent but be patient. And one thing we find is that sometimes it's hard for a supplier to figure out what is that right timing of communications, right? Because, and you know, we were talking about this recently as a team. We were kind of sharing in a mentoring relationship, and pretty much there's no, you know, significant RFP decision that is going to be, you know, an RFP gets created, or let's say the strategy or the decision to go to RFP gets created, the RFP gets launched, the business is awarded, and it happens in like a couple weeks. It's not going to happen in a couple months either. So the thing we like to say there is that don't worry about following up with a category manager that we put you in contact with, or a business stakeholder, or even with us on a, you don't have to follow up every week or every month, or sometimes not even, I think the right kind of timing is like every few months, because it's pretty much going to take at least 3 to 6 months, and sometimes more like 9 to 12 months or more to go through a full RFP process, because it varies depending on how big the opportunity is. But typically there's so many people that have to be involved with the decision, so many people that have to be involved with just defining the scope. Also keep in mind too that sometimes we might reach out to you with something. That doesn't mean, tomorrow you're going to hear from somebody as soon as you provide contact information or capabilities. A lot of times, and this is kind of unfortunate, but it's the reality that we might have an opportunity come across our desk and we get excited about it, and we have your name as a supplier, and we reach out and say, hey, is this a fit for you? We think you'd be a great match. And 2 weeks later, we might hear, oh, you know what, hold on, we're delayed, we're going to postpone this for a few months. And it's frustrating for you because you're trying to prepare, you're trying to get your resources ready, and we understand that. So we just try to, provide as much information as we can when we can. But so it's from a time perspective, I'd say RPs, I'd say on average, you're probably looking at about at least 6 months from kind of like, beginning of opportunity to deciding on an award and reviewing those responses from the RFPs. And I think, what was the other piece around just the timing of the relationship, right?
Yeah, just around, I think one of the messages is like, you will grow suppliers and maybe come in and, I'm just gonna turn my camera off, hold on. You will come in and build a relationship over time with the supplier.
Yeah, and I think even with that, like I said, with the example that we gave, that happened over a number of years. So we had one, I'd say one of the best case examples we had, this was a US diverse supplier coming into the end of 2019. They got identified for an opportunity, and I think the opportunity was maybe like 500,000 US dollars for the opportunity that they were going to be awarded the business. But it took them 3 years just to get in the door to present their capabilities, just because sometimes the timing isn't right, or the right fit, the match isn't there, or sometimes the business might want to do an RFP, but then they decide, what, we have existing suppliers that we're working with that we think can fit the need, so maybe they don't want to bid it out to onboard new suppliers. So there's always a mix of things going on, but in that case, it took 3 years for them to just get the opportunity to come in. Then they blew everybody away. They earned that 500K of business. We were able to then take that success and pass on the awareness of what they were doing and the success that they were having, and how they impressed the stakeholders, impressed the business owners, budget holders, decision makers, and take that into other areas. And then they were able to quickly grow their business. And then, now it'll end up being, let's say, a year and a half, 2 later, and they're going to be working on, $3 to $5 million worth of business already. So sometimes it takes a long time to get in, but I always say it takes a long time to get in, but then once you get in and prove yourself, if you are truly delivering that value, you can quickly grow.
Brilliant. Will, thank you.
Yeah, and one thing I would probably add to that, Will, is Marcelo touched on it earlier when he showed that diagram in terms of how our procurement structure is laid out, right? So we're trying to kind of be more cohesive and act as one procurement. So if you even get in the door and you've got a small opportunity to showcase what you can do, the supplier diversity team will leverage that, and we work across all of the different procurement areas. So try and kind of build that relationship up with other areas of procurement, because you might be delivering to one specific opportunity, and you have much more capability to deliver a wider reach into GSK, right? So we will try and make sure that we kind of get case studies done, share that across with the other stakeholders and other category managers, so they're aware that we've already got this diverse supplier that we're working with that has the following capabilities that they can increase their footprint within GSK as well.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So there's a whole host of questions in the chat. Hopefully we can maybe crack through some of them as well. And I'm just going to try and work my way through them as they came in. Cheryl was just saying, this was in relation to, I can't remember mentioning it about your financials, when you're filling out an RFP and putting in your financial statements, just asking whether you use Dun & Bradstreet reports as well to assess companies.
And Maggie, you broke up a little bit there. Were you saying, do we use, I missed one piece. Was it, do we use financial reports?
Dun & Bradstreet reports, whether you use Dun & Bradstreet reports.
For like financial solvency checks on suppliers, was that it?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So, and Marcel and Ross, feel free to chime in if you have anything to add to it. But what we do is we ask for financial information as a part of the RFP process. So one piece is we number one, first leverage what you're sharing with us. If there's a reason probably to, like, I don't know, like double check information or just rely on other resources, it's kind of I'd say a kind of case by case basis where it kind of depends on the resources that a category manager is leveraging. But so I would say it's possible, but I don't think it's the kind of the first go-to check for us to use the DNB information.
I agree. I know that as part of the TPR process we do, the TPO process we do Dun & Bradstreet, but I don't really think we necessarily do it in the RFX process. So but we highly recommend that if you have the ability to, do share the information that you can provide in the RFX process, because that's going to be screened prior to the next stages.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and the TPO process is our third-party oversight, which is basically, it's like our risk and compliance check before we onboard a supplier, but that would be after you've gone through being selected to be awarded business.
Great, thank you. There's a question which I think hopefully quite straightforward, whether RFPs are done in local languages or whether they're always done in English.
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I think the standard is English, but I think as appropriate in certain markets, they can translate that into different languages.
Okay, that was from one of our WBEs in Germany. Okay. And then there was a couple of questions around how do we get access to the RFPs? Do you have a supplier registration portal somewhere, or do suppliers need to be invited? Obviously, Raj, I know we work very closely around the visibility on RFPs that you're running, but any insight into how WBs can access the RFP opportunities?
So yeah, I think you touched on it, Maggie. So one of the key things we're doing right now is embedding supplier diversity into our procurement process, right? So any RFPs that go out, the supplier diversity team will be aware of that. So then we share that with the advocacy organizations to get referrals back. So definitely want to continue that. And a second way is, we touched on it earlier, is the events. So we always encourage suppliers to attend the events through the advocacy organizations, because that's where we would like to bring our stakeholders and category managers to engage with them and facilitate one-to-one meetings. And with regard to a portal, we're actually currently working with a diverse supplier in the US to create kind of a bespoke portal for GSK, so we can keep a track of all of the diverse suppliers that we're meeting through these events and any other ad hoc ways that we're engaging with them.
And Raj, Wendy's just asked about how do we get invited to those events, and I think, Wendy, really, Raj, anything that you're doing for diverse suppliers, invites would be shared with both We Connect International, MSD UK, and other advocacy organisations. So invites would probably come through us. But is there anything? Do you share anything publicly anywhere, or would they come through organisations like We Connect?
No, so a lot of the information we share is confidential. So you're probably getting the opportunities that you're seeing through the WeConnects and other advocacy organizations if you're members of any others. But we do share all of the opportunities with the members, all of the advocacy organizations that we're members of. And then we also do our own searches as well. So using the member databases to go out and search relevant suppliers. And then obviously the suppliers that we're meeting on a regular basis, whether it's myself and Georgie here in the UK or Marcelo and Will in the US, through the events and through other interactions, we are always aware of the suppliers that we're meeting, interacting with, and do try and reach out to those suppliers that are relevant when we're aware of the opportunities.
Fantastic. I've got a question. Do all purchases go through an RFP process, or is there maybe a minimum under which RFPs there's not an RFP needed? And I guess there's also a second question kind of aligned to that from others, like if a supplier if one of our women-owned businesses was interested in proactively reaching out to you to come to something which wasn't, that you weren't asking for, but that they would love to talk to you about to see whether there might be future interest. So kind of two things around, does everything go through an RFP? And if I've got something that you don't know about yet, how do I speculatively approach you?
So I'll try and take a stab at those. So there are spend thresholds that don't go through. There's a spend threshold for where procurement is required to manage the buying process. So there is spend that happens below those thresholds. What we try to do to get to that spend is we are making changes into our, like as Raj mentioned earlier, about just kind of embedding ourselves.
Hey, hold on one second. Let me just mute this conference call.
No, but we are trying to do more in the realms of policy and policy enforcement with our buying channel, so that even if there's no procurement oversight, that when a buyer just goes in to purchase something, that they'll be prompted to take a look at supplier diversity or diverse suppliers specifically. So we're kind of working with our buying guide teams on that. And also we just try to engage with stakeholders as much as we can and try to be proactive about the areas where we know that those thresholds do exist, but there is a lot of spend that happens underneath those thresholds. And in terms of, I think the second question was, Maggie, please remind me, what was the second part of the question?
About making a speculative approch. If
oh yes, in terms of reaching out. So
yeah, they would love to knock on your door and say, I've got this.
Yeah.
Can we have a conversation?
Yeah, so and I'll let others on the team respond too, but my thoughts on it are, we're always open to kind of the kind of quote unquote cold call or cold email that's just reaching out. The challenge I say with that is that if we're kind of putting our attention and resources to existing opportunities and things that we're engaging with our category teams on, kind of just driving and making things happen to bring delivery on the existing opportunities, we are going to put more of our focus there, as opposed to the things that we just kind of get the reach out and hey, I'm interested, but we don't let any reach out kind of go in vain. So what we try to do as a team is, when anybody reaches out, either we just kind of give a quick response of, we don't have any opportunities right now, but happy to keep your information on hold for when things come up. We try to almost kind of maintain somewhat of a bench of diverse suppliers that when something does happen, we're able to respond to it. But or if somebody has done their research, like Georgie mentioned earlier, somebody's done their research, they see a clear value add opportunity to deliver to GSK, and they're just really kind of burning to get that idea across to us so that we can pass it on. By all means, reach out and share that value proposition, because we're all about delivering value through our diverse suppliers. But I just ask that you also have patience, because if you reach out with something that is not an existing opportunity, we're going to have to go through the right channels, figure out who can look at that from a procurement team perspective, what are the strategies that are involved. So there's kind of a lot of moving parts that are involved when we just kind of get the kind of speculative reach out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. And I think that whole thing around, levels of, what's urgent, what has a priority. And so, as we've already discussed, RFPs take time anyway, let alone when it's not a concrete requirement, but hopefully that helps. There's a couple more questions. We've still got a little bit more time, but hopefully we can crack through some of these. Cheryl's just asked whether there's anything around, just internally, interested to know how you capture spend with diverse suppliers. And I guess from a WeConnect, and I'm going to talk for MSD UK as well, around whether you're looking at certified suppliers or whether whether actually, and Raj, I know that you've been really, really great at connecting us to diverse, to women-owned businesses that you're meeting along the way. But is there any insight around how you're capturing that spend with diverse suppliers internally?
Marcella, do you want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do keep track of the diverse suppliers that we have, that we do business with, and they need to be certified. So once we know the suppliers, we actually make sure that every couple of years we scrub our data of suppliers to make sure that we have identified all the ones that are certified with the advocacy organizations we have relationships with. So if you are, for instance, We Connect certified or MSD UK certified, we do make sure that we flag you in our database, so we have a way of tracking the spend with you.
Perfect. And just to add to that, we've got some great dashboards internally as well, where we can kind of track and monitor the spend that we've got with the existing diverse suppliers. And in addition to that, we also track all of the opportunities as part of the supplier diversity team that we get engaged with, and all of the suppliers we're then referring on to the category managers and following on the progress of that, right? So if we referred 10 suppliers, what the progress was, how many went through to the RFI stage, how many went through to the RFP stage, how many were successful at the end of that process as well. So we track that all as part of our team.
Yeah, brilliant.
And one thing that we're also trying to do to the best of our ability, because sometimes there are some limitations as to how much we can share, but we really want to make sure that we, whenever possible, we provide feedback to small and diverse businesses, because I think it's really critical. For a lot of times they don't hear anything why they were not successful in our RFXs, but we really try whenever we can to provide them with that feedback so they really can do better next time. But again, sometimes there are limitations in terms of what we can share, but we're striving to do better and better of providing that feedback so that they can use that as a way of improving their responses, not only to us, but to other businesses as well.
Great, thank you, Marcelo. And I've got a question that came in. You on your one of the slides, it was about the procurement spend. Part of that spend went through something that you called ESourcing, and we've got a question here about, we just talked about the best value isn't price, but if is ESourcing e-auctions, and I know for some of our diverse businesses that kind of participating in e-auctions can be quite challenging around how they show their best value. And that I just wondered if you can share any insight into if you are using kind of e-auctions. I know that might not necessarily be the same as e-sourcing, and what if you've got any good advice for our suppliers about how they best approach that.
Yeah, and that's a really great question, Maggie, because in reality, right, well, e-sourcing is actually a platform, right? So within e-sourcing, we can have RFXs that are done with this e-platform, can be auctions as well. And I would say that whenever the best approach for e-auctions usually are services that are commodities. So if they are commodities that are very simple for us to go ahead and specify, usually that's the ones that we go through e-sourcing, but it goes through auction. But in actuality, we can put anything through auction. So truth be said, is that when it comes to RFXs, we are always looking at cost, right? Every company is looking at the price and is looking at cost. But that's really the ability, what we want whenever you propose, if we are talking specifically about e-auction, yes, we're going to be focusing in probably the lowest, maybe 3-4 suppliers, and then having conversations around that. But I would say two things to the suppliers. One, we know that cost is a big component of what corporations are looking at. So unfortunately, you cannot remove that. But be mindful that yes, we are always looking at cost. But then again, look at not only the cost, but look at your total cost of ownership. Look at where you can remove cost and increase efficiencies within the process, and look at new innovations you can bring. Because we are not looking at, a lot of times we're not just looking at the price, but we are looking at the total cost of ownership, of the cost of everything throughout the process. You might not be the cheapest from a cost perspective, but if your total cost of ownership, you can remove cost and you can remove inefficiencies in the process to make sure that the value is greater, that will catch our attention. So reality is cost is very important, but be mindful that we are also looking at total cost of ownership. We are also looking at value, and we are also looking at innovation. But if you're extremely not competitive from a cost perspective, that usually, regardless of what field you're playing in, you're going to have a significant disadvantage.
Yeah, we had a question from Katie saying, how can you stand out from other suppliers when filling in an RFP form, and whether there's any examples you could share of kind of standout responses that you've seen? I mean, obviously you shared a couple of times around, what you're looking for, that innovation, the different ways of working, the value that you can bring. But I don't know if you've got any other anecdotes about, where you've seen a standout response to an RFP, and what it was that kind of caught your eye about the supplier?
Absolutely, and I'll let Will and Raj also talk about it. But I would say the main the best thing that you can do is really give us either a white paper or a good description of where you have done something similar and where delivered significant value. Because if you have that white paper or you have that specific case study that you can share with us, and especially if it's of course very similar to the very similar service or goods that we are looking at, that's going to definitely stand out, because we'll be able to see what the situation was, the target, and how you went about actually delivering that extra value. So if you have those case studies, they really speak volumes to our internal stakeholders. Will, Raj, anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that's literally the first point that I was going to make is making sure you back up what you're saying with evidence. So absolutely try and put as many case studies in as possible. And then going back to an earlier point that Marcelo touched on was, remember, you guys are the subject matter experts, right? We have a lot of procurement colleagues, and sometimes colleagues are moving across different teams and therefore might not be as aware of
Great
the particular
point.
category as you are yourself, right? So feel free to, even in the RFP process, is to challenge the current kind of status quo in terms of what we're asking for, right? If you think we can do something in a more efficient, in a better way, then feel free to bring that up and say, hey, have you considered doing it in this way? And I think that always helps stand out and show your expertise in this area as well.
Thank you, Raj. I cannot underestimate that. You guys are the SMEs, and a lot of times I've had suppliers saying, "Well, they asked a certain way, so they really know exactly what they want. I cannot suggest anything different." That couldn't be further away from the truth. Really, we know that you're the SMEs. We provide a template that makes it easier for us to evaluate across a number of suppliers. But if you know of a better way that you can do that, you can deliver more value, by all means, ask the question. I would always suggest that first you touch base with them first to understand how you would provide that answer, and it would help also the scoring team to evaluate that better. So have that conversation ahead of time, but do ask the question, and they will let you know how you can provide that data in the most suitable format to help them in the evaluation process. But absolutely, you're the SMEs. Feel free to ask questions.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I'll even add a little anecdote on that one. We had a recent RFP where small diverse suppliers were going toe-to-toe with several larger companies, and one of the diverse suppliers was the one that found the error in the RFP. And when I say the error, because they looked at it and they said, just from an industry perspective, it doesn't make sense to me why you have certain products listed here. From what I know about your business, I would have expected to see these other items and these other volumes. And it ended up that I said, well, hey, push that question forward back to the category manager, because then it becomes something that is a part of the RFP. And turned out we had to resend the RFP, a corrected version, because they were able to call that out. So that gave them a level of respect amongst our category managers, because they showed that they knew their business well and they knew the industry well. So definitely don't hesitate to call something out in an RFP, to ask the right questions. And as Marcelo said, but just checking to make sure that, hey, is this appropriate if I share additional information about this or that, just to kind of put your best foot forward. And one thing I will say on the opposite side of it, what you don't want to do, don't leave anything blank. We found that by leaving things blank where you think, oh, well, I can't deliver here, or I don't have the right service level on this item, don't just leave it blank, because it looks like you just didn't double check your RFP response. It makes it come across as you didn't take the right time, kind of from a professional standpoint, to make sure that your response was fully vetted and done and complete. If you can't do something, then just say to what extent you can do it. Put some type of response in there, just so that they know that you truly did complete the whole RFP process.
That's a great point. And just one more thing, Maggie, when you put something in, maybe you're not, it might change your response from a 0 maybe to a 1 or to a 3. And that might make a difference. Even if you just say, hey, we might not have that capability right now, but we know that we can partner with other companies that can help us to actually fulfill that space. So simple answers like that is something we can consider, because we know who can help us to actually deliver that service well. That would make a difference in your response.
And just a quick question about once an RFP, like the formal proposal's been submitted, what would be the typical steps after that? Would it be that you would review and choose a few suppliers to maybe come in and meet the team, or present maybe virtually now, but a quick insight into actually what happens next once you've submitted the first set of kind of big information?
I think you just answered it.
It doesn't work like that,
yeah,
that's perfect. Perfect, if that's how it works. So that's answered one of the other questions about what happens once you've actually submitted the RFP. I'm conscious that we are pretty much on the hour here. There's a couple of questions that we didn't get to, but I hope everybody has found this useful. And please, if there's any burning questions on the back of this, then I can certainly liaise back to Raj with any additional questions. And if you're listening back to the recording and you've got to this end, brilliant. Thank you very much for listening all the way through and for not missing out on any of the great insight that the GSK team have supplied this today. And to be completely honest, although this was about GSK, guys, you have really provided brilliant insight just generally around, participating in these formal processes, and kind of, the organizations that we work with, at WeConnect International, our member buyers are large organizations. I mean, you guys have said there's 700 people in the procurement team. So, this isn't just kind of going around the corner and knocking on the door. And getting answers immediately. So I'm going to say keep that patience in mind, and keep thinking about how you can bring that extra value. And I think that's really relevant for any business that you're talking to, about what you bring and the value you bring. But Raj, Will, Marcelo, and Georgie, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today. That's been really brilliant. And thank you to GSK for your ongoing support of WeConnect International and the supplier diversity topic generally. This is not easy, but we get to work with some amazing firms like GSK who are really pushing the boundaries and really helping them, GSK as an organization and other firms, to be able to buy more products and services from women-owned and other diverse-owned businesses. So thank you very much. Great to hear from you today, and this has been really, really helpful. Thank you very much, everybody.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.